Hello, fellow knights and warriors. Today I continue my adventure with Norman Saga and I will cover siege tactics, or how to make inside the enemy defensive positions. There are several ways to make it and we'll be covering them in this video. First of all, the most obvious one is to use a ladder. Several scenarios provides you ladders in the setup. To use a ladder, you have to carry a ladder into the enemy defenses. Two warriors can carry a ladder, and if they are carrying this ladder, their movement points are reduced by 2. They can't do anything save to moving. They cannot fight, they cannot defend or attack, and they cannot make enemies to perform infiltration test. They are simply carrying this ladder into the enemy stockade. So you can see we have two Normans here, and they are carrying a ladder. Their movement allowance is reduced by 2, so it is 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now, sorry, nope. They can move only 3 because you know there is a slope here. So slope would cost them 2 movement points. So no, they wouldn't be able to move there in this movement phase. They would have to wait until another movement phase to move there. And now they are allowed to place this ladder. When you are placing the ladder, you have to replace the counter. To the position when the ladder is against the wall, like that. Now you can move up the wall with your ladder. You can also change the position of the ladder when your warriors are next to the ladder. If you have 2 warriors on the hexes adjacent to the ladder, you can spend 2 movement points to change this ladder's direction, for example like that. So it will lead into this hex instead of that, or you can move it 1 hex in some other direction, but no more than 1 hex. And now, how to use a ladder? You need to spend 3 movement points to move onto ladder, and you are now climbing up the ladder, up or down. It doesn't mean. You are simply on the ladder. And next, you need to spend 4 movement points to move from the ladder onto the platform on or to the ground on the other side of the stockade. Remember that you have to make a test for jumping. Make a 1d6 roll to see if you weren't wounded in the process. And now you are free to attack enemies on the other side of the stockade. Of course, it is not always that easy. For example, if there is enemy on the other side of the stockade next to your ladder, he might try to topple this ladder. He makes a 1d10 roll. If he rolls 1d6, a ladder is toppled, and if it is 7 or 10, a ladder remains in place. Let's assume that he managed to topple this ladder. What happens? First of all, a ladder is toppled. It is placed like that again, and if there was a character on this ladder while the ladder was toppled, he is wounded and he is placed on one of these hexes adjacent to the ladder, but no on the hexes occupied by other characters, and of course not on the other side of the stockade. If there was a character on the hex where ladder was toppled, you have to simply replace this character on the one of the adjacent hexes, but there are no additional effects on them. So it doesn't mean that the ladder is going to hurt him. He's simply changing his positions to avoid being hit by the falling ladder. But all in all, only the character that was on the ladder is wounded in the process. If you have a character that can fire and he's on the ladder, let's return. Such character may fire on the enemies on the other side of the stockade, but he can only fire on the hex on the other side of the stockade. He cannot fire anywhere else, only on this hex, and if he does so, then the enemy benefits from heavy cover. So, as you can see, it takes a while to use a ladder, especially if you have some slower warriors, but otherwise it is quite an easy and effective way to get on the other side of the stockade. Another way to give enemy a hell is to use stone thrower. Stone throwers are provided by the scenarios, and they are used in both tactical siege scenarios or in the full siege scenarios. They can be used on map in the tactical scenarios and off-board in the bigger siege scenarios. To use siege thrower, you need to have 3 men on the adjacent hexes, and if you want to move this beast, you need to have 4 of them. And if you are moving siege thrower, you can only move it via 2 hexes on the clear terrain or 1 hex via scrap. So this is not a very movable structure, but it can be really devastating weapon. It has 30 hexes range. Impressive, isn't it? And it can fire once per 3 turns. So again, you need to use these counters with numbers to mark when it was fired, and then you need to wait 3 turns until it will be loaded and it will be able to fire again. It fires in the offensive fire phase only. I guess it's pretty obvious. And when you are targeting the hex, you have to make a roll for impact, just like with normal missile fire. But there comes a difference. When you are using a missile thrower, you can see that the impact hex range is definitely bigger. You are rolling 2d10, and if you get from 2 to 11, you hit the proper hex. Otherwise, your hit is scattered or on one of these many hexes. So it is definitely not that easy to hit the desired hex with stone thrower. But what happens if you hit the hex you wanted to? Now you need to use one of the tables. If there was enemy character here, you need to use stone thrower column in the missile against mounted targets or against infantry. As you can see, it can be quite devastating. Well, it's not fun to be hit by the big piece of rock. But if you were targeting some wooden structure like stockade, you need to use battering table. You are using W column in the part of 1. You are using part of 3 only in the big siege scenarios, not in the tactical ones. So you are making a roll in W column, and if you get 8, 9 or 10, this means that such structure is damaged. So if the structure is damaged, this means that it is half destroyed, and another hit is going to destroy such structure completely. So this can be a very devastating thing, but the problem is that it takes a while to use it. You can see that it needs 3 turns to fire again, and it needs 2 hits to destroy structure. But if it hits enemy on such a hex, it can be a really deadly thing. The next way to make a game a bit more hotter is to use flame. When your character is adjacent to the wooden structure, like for example stockade or siege engine, he can declare that he's spending his entire turn or doing nothing but trying to kindle a flame on such a hex. If he wasn't forced to move away by the enemy during this turn, you can place a flame counter on the one of the adjacent hexes, only one. And now this hex is on fire. It doesn't mean that it's going to be destroyed instantly. You need a time. But this hex is in fire. This hex is off limits. Now, if there was enemy unit on this hex, you need to see if he wasn't hit by this flame. If he can retreat, he is placed on one of the adjacent hexes. If he cannot, he is wounded, and if he cannot evacuate from this hex in the next turn, he is killed by the flame. Now, every turn after a flame is kindled, you need to mark the number of the turn. So the flame was kindled, you place a marker with 1. Next, you place a marker with 2, and then you place a marker with 3. After 3 turns, the structure is completely destroyed by the flames. So this is pretty a good way to get rid of the stockades or enemy siege engines. But the good news is that the flame can spread. If you have a flame counter on the hex and there are additional wooden structure on the adjacent hexes, you have to make a roll for each of them and check a result in the flame table. Here you can see there are a couple of columns, and for the spreading fire you need to make a roll for each of these hexes. If you will get 1 to 6, there is nothing. But if you will get 7 to 10, then you have to place additional flame markers on the one of these hexes. You are rolling once for each of these hexes. Okay, now we know how devastating flames can be, but if there is a way to get rid of them, actually it is. If you have your character on the hex adjacent to the flame, you can say that he's going to try to extinguish this flame, and such character spends his entire movement and all the other actions, so he cannot do nothing. He cannot move, he cannot shoot, he cannot attack, and he's simply trying to extinguish the flame. And he's making a roll in the fire table with in the dosing the fire column. If you will get 1 to 5, a flame is extinguished. If you get a higher result, flame still burns on. If you have more characters around, they can make multiple attempts to dose such a flame on the single hex, but one character can only try to extinguish the flame on one hex. So this is a good thing to have some characters around. So if enemy is going to start spreading the fire, you can simply make them your fire watch and run quickly and try to extinguish the flame before it will start to destroy your defensive positions. There is another way to spread flames around. If you have your archers, you might tell them to use their burning arrow to try to kindle flames on the enemy wooden structures, but it is definitely harder. First of all, they need to be in the short range from the target hex, and next, when they are firing their missiles, then you are making a roll in the flaming arrow column of the fire table. As you can see, when you are targeting gate or stockade, you need to roll natural 10. If you are targeting a stone thrower or Greek fire thrower, you need to get 8 to 10. So it is definitely hard to hit these structures with burning arrows, but it is, well, a bit more safer than approaching the enemy positions. So the choice is yours. We already spoke about fire, and now let's cover one of the funniest weapons in this game. It is Greek fire, a medieval version of the flamethrower, something that can be really deadly. Greek fire has to be placed on the hex, and it cannot be moved in anywhere. It has to be operated by at least 2 of your men. In the offensive fire phase, you can target one of the hexes that are in its front arc. Notice that it is placed in this way, so your covered arc is like that. But when you are firing with Greek fire, you can fire up to the 10 hexes, but no closer than 5 hexes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can fire here or further on the 10 hexes, but you cannot fire closer. And when you are targeting your hex, you are not making a roll for impact, you are not making a roll for damage. Simply, you are targeting a hex and you are placing a naphtha marker on this hex. So let's assume we wanted to fire on this hex, and on all the other 6 adjacent hexes. Like that. Now, this naphtha itself is completely harmless. It is not doing any damage by itself. But now, if it will be ignited, for example, by archer firing flame arrows, it starts to burn. And it turns into flames. So, if it burns, it all burns together. If you hit this hex, this means that all the hexes that are adjacent to the burning naphtha and are covered by naphtha markers are burning as well. And now you are making a roll for each character which is on the naphtha hex. If you get 1-5, this character is killed. 6-8, this character is wounded and has to retreat 1 hex, and 9-10, this character has to retreat 1 hex. If it is forced to retreat on another hex with burning naphtha, it has to make another roll. So yes, very, very deadly weapon. But there comes the price. This is a very delicate structure and can be easily broken. Every time you fire with Greek fire, you need to make a roll. If you get 1, it breaks completely, and all the hexes adjacent to are covered with naphtha. If you get 2, the Greek fire is broken and cannot be used until the end of the scenario. If you get 3 to 10, the Greek fire works fine until the end of the next attempt to be used. Also, there is one more important thing about Greek fire. Loading and reloading is time consuming, so you need 5 turns until you will be able to fire again with Greek fire. So the rate of fire is really, really slow. it is a pretty good idea to spray naphtha on the hexes that are already covered with fire markers, because naphtha burns instantly and it burns until the end of the game. So it can quickly cover quite a large area with fire, especially if there is already fire on any of these hexes. Another way to get on the stockade or on the wall is to use grappling hook. Grappling hooks can be given to the soldiers according to the scenario. When they have them, place a rope marker on them. When your character starts his movement phase adjacent to the stockade or to the wall, he can try to use his rope and use it to make his way up. You have to make a roll first, and if you will get 1 or 2, it falls. If you get 3 or 10, it succeeds. Next, if it succeeds, you have to place a hook on the place you want to climb. And now, this is all you can do in the one turn, and now, in the next turn, if you are still on this hex, you can climb above. It consumes 8 movement points, so only characters that wear no armors can use this way to get on the walls. Character spends all his movement points to get up, so you can have actually 2 characters there on one hex. One is climbing up the wall on the rope, and one is still waiting down for his turn to climb up. And now, when you are climbing, you can be attacked by the enemy. If there is enemy on the hex that you are climbing, you have to take a combat. And this combat is shifted 2 columns to the right, and if you are wounded or stunned during this battle, you are killed instantly, and retreat takes no effect on you. Also, enemy may cut your rope. If he is next to your rope, he may take a roll, and if it is 1 to 3, the rope is cut down, and your character, if he was on the rope, is falling down, and he is automatically wounded. If there was another character on the same hex waiting down below, he is also stunned. So that's pretty bad. Grappling hook can also be used to tear down the stockade. If you want to use it in this way, you need at last 4 of your characters standing in the 2 ropes, at last 1 hex away from the stockade you want to tear. Next, one of your characters needs to place the grappling hook on the stockade in the same way as you are doing this when you are trying to climb, and then in the next turn you are spending all your movement points and making 1d10 roll. If you get 1 or 2, the stockade is down. You have to place a stockade down marker on it, and now it's down. If one of your characters is wounded, then you have to roll 1 to make such thing happen. If 2 or more of your characters are wounded, you cannot do so. And this concludes the rules of the siege tactics.